I have a very odd background. Although I graduated university in degrees in biochemistry and economics with a minor in music, so that just meant I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be in a rock band, but I wasn't very good. So then I went into a family business that we grew and we sold, and we were fortunate, we sold it to a gentleman named Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. And I had nothing to do with that. But it gave me a chance to work within the company for a period of time, and I worked within one of the operating companies, and there I had a lot of mentorship, which allowed me to then transition into the technology field. My mentor had funded a software company in the Valley that we ran in the 90s, and in the 90s you could be very successful without knowing what you were doing, which was our case. And so my mentor said that it was always better to be lucky than smart, but you need to know the difference, and so I knew that we got very, very lucky. We grew the company, we sold it, and that gave me the chance to go into venture capital. And then after venture capital, came back to San Diego, where I was working with a little startup accelerator in San Diego that had been very important to the community. And we kind of took that idea, and I started a group called Global Connect, which was a way to take these kinds of startup acceleration programs global, but also to understand how other regions approached innovation. Because what we suspected is that culture played a really big role in innovation, and if you tried to take a prescriptive approach to innovation, that it wasn't going to be very successful in other places, and it turns out we were right. So to date, we've built 57 programs in 23 countries around the world. Most of them are still in operation today. And so this has given us a lot of knowledge that brings us today. We're venture capitalists who also happen to have practical experience in the area of economic development around innovation. So we wrote the book really as a way to kind of gather our thoughts, because we saw that there were a lot of people talking about innovation and describing what happens in innovation, but very few people really getting down to the process of how do you actually do it. So we wrote the book really to take our thoughts and to put into words exactly how do you build these ecosystems and why is it so difficult. You know, even San Diego, where I'm from, which is a successful technology cluster, after 40 years isn't a Silicon Valley. It's San Diego, but it's not Silicon Valley. And the people in San Diego, where I come from, constantly ask, why haven't we become a Silicon Valley? And there's very specific reasons why. One, why they didn't, and two, why they shouldn't try to. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in the presentation. Oh, okay. Which means I still have to work. Ooh. This is to impress you. Is it working? This was actually a quote from a book. Years ago, when I worked within the Berkshire Hathaway companies, we were looking to acquire another company. And what was interesting, too, it was a company that I actually met while I was on vacation here in Italy. I met the CEO of the company. But before they would let us buy their company, they made us read this book called Trust by Francis Fukuyama. And it's a very difficult book to read, but the thrust of it is that trust is the key driver in economic sustainability. That all activity that happens in economic development is always carried out by groups of people rather than individuals. And how these groups work is really what sustains them. And so fundamentally what's different about the Silicon Valley than other places is not that the people are smarter, and it's not that they have more capital. It's the organizational systems that they have are just better. Knowledge travels in the most efficient pathway. And we tend to break down a lot of social and professional hierarchies, which then just accelerates, and not only accelerates success, but it also accelerates failures so that those people can then try again. So this is how we describe it. This is the essence of the book. And one, because I'm a biologist, and two, because I was trying to explain kind of these very complex economic development systems to others, and it's a tough concept to get. I tend to use metaphors a lot. So this particular metaphor is between the rainforest and the plantation. Now, industrial economies, most of the industrial economies around the world, were also based on agrarian economies. These ideas of scarce resources. You only had so many seeds or water. In industrial societies, you had so much iron, gold, oil, that societies were based around how efficiently you use those resources. And the more efficiently we used them, translated into what we called productivity. And so our measures of economic growth were productivity and efficiency. But they were all based on mindsets of scarcity, allocation of resources. In fact, when I was working in my previous business, my boss told me that the way we measure the performance of all of our CEOs is in how well you allocate capital, how efficiently you allocate it. And so it was on this industrial paradigm. And so these industrial paradigms look a lot like plantations, or in this case, vineyards. And the thing you notice about the picture of this is how structured it is. It's very linear. But in that linearity is an incredible amount of efficiency. We do that because now we know how to allocate the resources. We can set up drip water systems. We can harvest in very efficient ways. And at the end of the day, we have really good grapes. What we don't have, though, is how many of you have heard of the botrytis fungus? So the botrytis fungus is a fungus that often attacks grapes. But what happens is that as it gets on the grape, it causes the grapes to shrink, and it concentrates the sugar within the grapes. And it makes the very best dessert wines. In fact, those dessert wines sell for more than regular wines do. If we were strictly trying to get good wine out of this, regular wine, we would throw those grapes away. In fact, that's what originally happened, is that they would throw those grapes away and destroy them. In this model, those grapes are very important. In another analogy, it's similar to if you have weeds growing up in your vineyard, you pull them out because they're not what you want. What we find in the rainforest, which we'll see in a second, is that the weeds are the Googles of the world and the Facebooks. You don't know that they're important until sometime down the road. But at the time they first present themselves, very often they just look annoying or odd to you. So in this first one, all of our knowledge is focused on engineering of process. We take the knowledge we have and we apply it to create better processes. But creative economies are based on mindsets of abundance. In a knowledge society, the capacity of resources is infinite. You can tap into nearly infinite amounts of knowledge within a community. And what we find is actually the more you waste the knowledge, and it's not so much waste, the more you put knowledge out there, the better the outcome you will have. You want to get more ideas out there. In the first model of scarcity, if I get together with you and I share with you an idea, in the mindset of scarcity is you can take my idea and, pardon my Italian, screw me. You can use it to my disadvantage and your advantage, this idea of what we call a zero-sum game. But in the idea of abundance is that if we share ideas, then actually you have my idea and I have your ideas, and we can both combine those and do something really great. And almost all innovation, in fact, all innovation is built on prior invention. So the idea of getting inventions together is very important. Matt Ridley in Oxford wrote a book called The Rational Optimist, and he said, innovation is all about ideas having sex. And so you really want to promote promiscuity of ideas. You have to create reasons for people to get together over and over again. And when you do that, they look a lot like rainforests, hence the name of the book, where they tend to look very messy and random, but actually there is an order to it because all the species within the rainforest reinforce each other. And the weeds that were in the plantation are, as I said, can be the major species within the rainforest. They are the Googles. So as an example, when Google first started, no one would invest in it. Every venture capitalist passed on it. Wall Street had said that search had been optimized and that advertising revenue was a very poor business model. In fact, the head of technology transfer at Stanford University, every year she has her licensing officers write down what they think is the pick for the next very hot technology. And in 25 years, they've never gotten it right. They thought the Yahoo guys were crazy. They thought Larry and Sergey were annoying. And they never saw that this technology really had the potential it did. And so they realized that these ideas just have to get out there and that the market will decide. So these are the difference in mindsets between scarcity and abundance. And really what you want to do is move from these kinds of emotions and actions over to those on the right. And so in the first model, we said we're trying to engineer process. In the rainforest, really what we're trying to do is engineer environment. And really what we're trying to strive for is, can you engineer serendipity? Because we know serendipity, random chance occurrences, are really what drive these things. The idea of a Sean Parker, meeting with Mark Zuckerberg, the chances of a Peter Thiel, having come into Zuckerberg's orbit, are random occurrences. And the thing is, how do you adapt those? So just like in a farm or a rainforest where temperature and humidity play a role, for a new startup, you have a set of inputs too that drive it. So the question I'd like to ask you is, 20 years from now, what do you think will be the next hot company, the next Instagram? The next company that will start up and 13 months later sell for $1 billion with 10 employees? The answer is we haven't the slightest idea. In fact, there's a very good chance that it hasn't even been thought of yet. Well, that just goes to show you that as we try to prepare our economies, our workforce, all of you here, as you try to prepare for that, you really can't, because we don't know what it's going to be. So the best you can do is create a community that when those ideas do present themselves, you can move around them very, very quickly. You can get them funded, you can find the mentorship, you can find the space for them, you can find the other resources and the customers for them. And the speed at which you can do that is really the defining element of how well these companies do. So these are all built on trust. And of course, the one thing I notice about Italy is that the strength of social networks, the strength of social media, and how you use blogging and Twitter and Facebook is really impressive. The number of Twitter followers that we get and the number of Facebook requests we got in advance of this meeting were amazing. Well, all those social networks are built on trust. And so we have to build these trusts that break, these tribes of trust that break down these social, professional hierarchies and allow us to create that promiscuity. So this is what we're going to leave you with, is that before we jump into the canvas, that really on the left is really what we call the old paradigm. This is the way we teach. This is the way we reinforce what we're doing in the economy. And we actually have to move over to the right from it. Large companies, we tend to try to figure out what we do well, and then we try to repeat it lots of times and just do it better and better and better. But in small, innovative companies, you're always experimenting, and you're learning, and really how fast you do it is important. And we always say that you don't want to fail. Most economies say, failure is not accepted. But in a rainforest economy, you want to try fast, learn fast, fail small, and iterate rapidly. And we like people to fail, and we like them to fail as many times as is necessary, because that knowledge helps us build companies better. So these are the rules. These are the behaviors we want. And we'll talk about these as we get into the rainforest. But the most important one, well, there's a number of them. Number 5 and number 7 are really important. You seek fairness, not advantage. In the old economy, where you had a zero-sum game, I was always optimizing what I was trying to get. And you may lose, but it wasn't about you, it was about me. Because if I optimized what I got, I could be successful. In the rainforest, that doesn't work. And the same thing with paying it forward. We have to pay it forward where we work with people. So when we design these rainforests, really what we're trying to do is bring these 3 things together. So we want people with ideas, people with the ability to turn those ideas into something, and then smart capital. The capital that actually creates a lot of value. And when you bring those 3 things together, you get opportunity creation. And it's really what drives the system. So for us to design a rainforest, we actually start, this is the overall process. We go in and we do an assessment. Basically, this is the equivalent of what we're going to do today is kind of your regional genome. Just as in when we sequence your own human genome, there's those things which are expressed that you can do nothing about. Could be your geography, could be your climate, could be a certain physical infrastructure that you have. But then there are other things that are expressed that you can change: behaviors, attitudes, culture, policies, regulations. And we need to assess those. And then once you do it, you can then design a system that can harness the value of what you just assessed. And then you have to build it. But the thing we understand is that when you build these things, you'll never get it right. It's not possible. So you have to build things that are flexible and adaptive. And as you do them, just keep on listening to what the market's telling you and iterate upon them as you grow and as you learn. And so these are the questions that really go into how you define it. And these are in the book, and Gianluca will go into this a little bit. And then this all fits into a canvas. And the reason we created the canvas is because we needed some kind of visual way to collect all the assumptions we were going to make about a region. And it's not random, the questions. What we found is that in every cluster that has been successful that we've studied, it's centered around a set of core leadership, what we call leaders and champions. But they're not the usual suspects, or they're not always the usual suspects. Many of the people were not household names. In fact, very few of them were at the beginning of the clusters. And the other thing we found is that in most of the more contemporary clusters, the people who were the leaders of it were people who came from someplace else where they had already kind of understood that culture and had brought that culture with them. Well, go ahead.
I would leave the slide up, Greg. Well, first of all, thank you very much. I mean, it's...